my name is Shelley Walker. Yes, not yet Rev Shelley Walker. I don't think that's my official title, but that's how it feels. My pronouns are she, her. And I want to echo Reverend Shannon in saying Happy Father's Day to all of you who participate. For those of you who don't, checks notes. Today is also Global Wind Day, National Nature Photography Day. I can get behind that. National Prune Day. I think I'll take a pass. My favorite, it's also National Smile Power Day. So celebrate however you like to celebrate. Interestingly enough, 810 years ago today was the day that King John of England placed the royal seal on the Magna Carta, signing it into law. June 15th, 1215, the Magna Carta went into effect. For those of you who don't remember history from, I'm not going to talk about how many years ago, the Magna Carta is considered the foundational text for modern legal and constitutional rights. It established the principle that everyone, including the monarch, everyone is subject to the law. It established the principle that the law applies to everyone. Isn't that interesting? 810 years ago today. Yeah, very interesting given that yesterday many of us took part in the No Kings March. Now, I want to tell you that although I consider myself a pretty political person, John was in a stroller the last time I went to a march, and I realized it was a gun reform march held in the year 2001. Was the last time I physically marched. I've done other things, but that was the last march that I experienced. And so it had been a minute since I had participated, and that we were actually in our wonderful group, and I know many of you were at other marches and at that march, and there were 30,000 people there, so we didn't see each other, but we had several members of our group who had never done an actual march before, so it was really, really fun. We, of course, in the car on the way home, after eating a voodoo donut, we're talking about when you park at Voodoo, we're talking about our favorite things. I want to tell you my favorite things from yesterday. My first favorite thing from yesterday was the chants. Show me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. To hear 30,000 people, show me what community looks like. This is what community looks like, right? They were so great. I love that. I love the chants. This is what community looks like. The second thing that I really noticed and took in, and it took me a while to process it enough to be able to put into words, was the absolute beauty in diversity of all of the people. There were different agendas. There were different focuses. There were different ways of showing up. All of us showed up differently. You know, our group, we are for something and against nothing. That shows up differently than people who are anti this, anti that. But it didn't matter because we all just showed up, and the beauty of the diversity of it all, not just in what we looked like, in what we dressed like, how we showed up, but how our beliefs showed up peacefully, lovingly, joyfully. Wasn't it inspiring, Lynn? It was so great. It was so great. So I was really inspired by the creativity and the oneness in diversity, the diversity in the oneness. The third thing that really had me thinking was what it felt like to have a palpable experience of love on the move. When you are moving in the same direction with 30,000 strangers, there is a palpable experience of emotion, Emotion is when the feelings that we have inside move out into the world. Anytime E or X is a prefix, it comes from the Greek ex, which means from here to there. So emotion is our feelings moving into the world. And to be in solidarity with 30,000 people moving in the same direction, as love, for love, in love, by love. It was such a powerful, powerful experience with the purpose and the passion and the hope, all moving in the same direction. It was very, very inspiring. So I want to say a personal thank you to everyone who showed up all around the globe to remind us about the difference between force and power. People are power. And when we come together, we can move mountains. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. This is what community looks like. The talk today is titled Love on the Move because that's what I see. Not only when we bring that sacred divine love into the streets, like many of us did yesterday, using the power of our presence and our voice for love because we are the hands of love. But love is on the move in the streets because we have made room for love to move in our hearts, for love to move in our lives. We have made room for divine love so we can move through the world as this love. And this is what we were put on this planet to demonstrate. And it's glorious, isn't it? It's glorious. Albert Einstein once said, "Nothing happens unless something is moved." Nothing happens unless something is moved. And this is true in physics, and it's true in our hearts. Nothing happens until we are moved. And when we are moved and things start to happen, the world starts to shift around us to accommodate that movement. And I'm starting to believe, Reverend Shannon, what she's been telling us all along. Maybe we really are made for these times. Maybe we are. I'm willing to consider that you might be right, Rev. I learned a long time ago, and this was definitely reaffirmed for me this weekend, that the way we show up matters. When we show up for love, it changes everything. Now, today is Father's Day, and I know that can be tricky for some of us, but I think it's really important to talk about for a few minutes the movement that I see of the healing of the divine masculine in our world. I think it's really important that we acknowledge the movement of love that is happening as the divine masculine, because I see change happening. I see really good things happening, and we know that what we focus on grows. And so it's important that we focus on these positive stories. So I'm going to share with you two stories about how a loving interaction with two fathers, one's my own, and the other is the one that gracefully said yes to being the father of my kids. I want to talk about how two interactions changed me at a fundamental level and changed the world around these men in ways that they aren't aware of until today. Hi, Dad. The first story is about my own dad. And I want to tell you a little something about my dad. My parents divorced in 1978. I was 5 years old. Do the math. It's okay. I'm not afraid of it. And my mother automatically took custody of us, and it was a very short period of time before my father realized that that wasn't a healthy situation for my sister and I. And so in 1978, my father took custody of two girls and became a single dad. Now, in 1978, that was very rare and a little outrageous, and he did not care. He was a girl dad, and he was not going to have anything but the best for his daughters. My dad raised us on the protest songs of the 60s. We had a lot of Peter, Paul, and Mary, Kingston Trio, and Clearwater Revival in my house growing up. We would sit around on blankets in the living room with his 12-string Gibson, singing protest songs on Friday nights. This is how we spent our time. And then he wondered why I turned into a peace-loving liberal hippie. Dad, it's really your own fault. Because now, today, we have really different ways of seeing the world. Our worldviews have shifted and changed and grown so very, very far apart. And we have different ways of seeing governance and democracy. And in some fundamental ways, we have differences in what's right and wrong. And this has been really, really hard for me. It's been hard for us. And in 2020, we had an exchange that I want to share with you. This was 2020. I was struggling to reconcile our different points of view, and I was doing my very, very best to love him over there. Remember our practice during the pandemic of loving them over there? God, that helped. Even while loving him over there, I felt that divide between us, and it just didn't feel good. I was having a hard time reconciling the loving and deeply caring person that I knew my father to be. I was having a hard time reconciling that person with some of the conversations we were having and some of the beliefs that he was expressing. And mostly, I was struggling with my own struggle. Because I am very much a love everybody and our differences make us stronger and diversity is beautiful and diversity of opinion is beautiful and let's have that hard conversation. That's me. And so the fact that I could not seem to move past this divide was painful for me. It was teaching me about who I thought I was and who I was showing up as. That was really hard for me. So I want to acknowledge that I know for a fact, I'm not going to name names, but many of you have had a very similar experience over the last 10 years because we talk about it and we've supported each other through that. I know I'm not the only one in this dynamic. So in an effort to heal this divide between myself and my father, I reached out to him and I said, Dad, look, I know you feel it too. And I said, I have a question for you. I said, when I was younger, I made choices that you fundamentally disagreed with. I have a tattoo, for example. That took me a year to wear a swimsuit in front of my family, because that's the kind of family I was raised in. I said, I made choices that you fundamentally disagreed with. But no matter what I did, no matter how I was acting out, we were talking about acting out teenagers yesterday in the car too, because that's the other conversation that it will be had, where two or more are gathered who have teenagers in their lives. I said, no matter what I did, no matter how I acted out, no matter what decisions and choices I made, I always, 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 always knew you loved me and accepted me. And I said, I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm having a hard time accepting you right now. So what's the secret, Dad? What's the secret? And he said, sweetheart, my job was never to accept you. He said, acceptance was never on the table. He said, my job was to love you. That's all. Acceptance was never on the negotiating table for him. I was the one that put acceptance on the negotiating table of our relationship. Didn't that teach me a lot? Didn't that teach me a lot about who he is and who I was showing up as? My job is and always has been to love you. That's all, he said. Now, I know that not everyone has had this level of acceptance and love from their parents, so I do need to say one very, very important thing. Here in this community, in my heart, and I can say with utter confidence in Reverend Shannon's heart, acceptance is not on the negotiating table. You are loved and accepted for exactly who you are. You are so loved. So if there is anything in you that needs to bask in the love of kindness, rest here in this community because you are so loved. Know that this Father's Day, you are so loved. Last week when she gave a talk titled Love Always Wins, Reverend Shannon said, just like people who plant the seeds of oak trees, the shade of which they'll never see, we too are here to plant the seeds of love for generations of people that will come after us who we will never know. My dad probably didn't know that he was planting seeds of love that day when we had that conversation. But you can bet that the fruit of the tree that has grown of loving kindness is playing out not only in our relationship, but in my relationship with my children and with you all. That taking acceptance off of the negotiating table has changed the way I move through the world. And that is a healing that has happened in the world because of a healing of the divine masculine. That conversation could have only happened for me through my Father. So, this is the first story of the healing of the divine masculine. And the moral of this story for me is that we can all learn to lead from love, every single one of us. And when we take acceptance off the table, that's when we make room for love to move. Now, our second story that I'm going to tell you today took place just a couple of weekends ago. My family was in San Diego for a certain event. And one of our guilty pleasures when we're in SoCal, no, it's not In-N-Out Burger. I'm sorry, all you Californians. I don't get it. It's kind of gross. Please don't click away. You, I accept. Your burger, not so much. Our guilty pleasure when we're in Southern California is Ruby's Diner. Do you know Ruby's? Okay, Ruby's Diner is this like 50s style diner with chrome and red leather seats, and they give the kiddo a little cardboard, like old-fashioned car to build while he's waiting on his food. And it's just, and there's like planes and trains going around a thing. It's Ruby's Diner. And it's one of those things for our family, we do something once and then it's like a tradition and you do it every time, no matter what, which makes Christmas quite the extravaganza at our house. But Ruby's is our SoCal tradition. So the night before my graduation, after a long day at the San Diego Zoo, we rolled into Ruby's. And we rolled all the way, sometimes people take a look at my kid in his giant power chair and go, let's take a journey. And they take us all the way through the restaurant. So we roll all the way past every table, and I can't help but notice at the table, at the table beyond us, as we rolled past, there was an elderly gentleman sitting there alone. And he looked at us and nodded, as most people do when we're in our circus, our Walker Circus in the world. It's amazing we ever leave the house, sweetheart. And we get seated and we order our food, and Alex is building the car, and I notice over time, I notice that every single waiter and every single server, and even the milkshake guy, came and said hello to this gentleman. Every single one came for a quick smile and a hello. They went out of their way in a busy restaurant to greet this one man, and I thought, okay, he's somebody special. You could just tell. And eventually, we were eating our dinner, and he finished his, and he paid, and he got up to leave, and he came over to our table, and he asked about Alex, as many people do, with kindness and curiosity. And Alex is used to it now. It's just the way we move through the world, and it's okay. And my husband did what my husband did for the entire weekend. He introduced me not as his wife, but as the seminary graduate. So dear. So dear. And we found out that Ralph was a retired minister. He had spent his entire life in ministry. And so we chatted about that a little bit, and he asked me what kind of seminary I had graduated from. And his response to my response, I could tell that he graduated from a different kind of seminary. And I'm used to that now too, Reverend Shannon. I no longer worry about clearing out the PTA meetings like I used to. We chatted for a couple of minutes. He was very, very kind. And he looked at me and he said, tomorrow would have been my wife's 65th. No, tomorrow would have been my wife's birthday. He said we were married for 65 years. And he got out his phone and he showed us a picture of his wife, Diane, at the age of 15, the day he met her. And we chatted about Diane, and he talked about what a supportive minister's wife she was. Not everyone can do that, and she did. She took on that role with grace and with loving kindness. And he told us about his life with Diane, living all over the world as a minister. And over the course of that conversation, what do you think, 6, 7 minutes, Michael? 3 times, with tears in his eyes, he stopped himself in the middle of a sentence and looked at my husband and said, "I'm sorry, I'm feeling really vulnerable right now." And Michael, with all the grace in the world, would say, "It's okay to be vulnerable." And then he would wait. And Ralph would take a breath, he would swallow, he would get himself back together, and he would continue to tell his story. And then he would stop. And he always said to Michael, man to man, man to man, he would say, "I'm sorry, I'm feeling very vulnerable right now." And Michael would say, "That's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable." 3 times. And Ralph got ready to leave, and I just reached out and I touched his arm and I said, "Hey, thank you for letting us celebrate Diane's birthday with you. Happy birthday, Diane." And Michael asked Ralph for a hug. And right there in Ruby's Diner, I watched these 2 men who were strangers hug each other with such loving kindness, with tears and with genuine affection. And then Ralph walked away. I know, right? You deserve that, my friend. And this is how we heal. One conversation, one hug, one vulnerability at a time. This is how we heal. Ralph's safety in being vulnerable was born out of Michael's ability to completely hold that container of safety, because Michael had no judgment about Ralph's feelings. And in fact, if anything, Michael respected him more for being able to express what he was feeling. You see, because Michael fully accepted Ralph exactly where he was, Ralph was able to be authentic and vulnerable and share his love with us. And it was a gift. It was a gift that both of these men gave my family. The little kids watched the whole exchange. And when Ralph walked away, Katie looked at me across the table and she just smiled. And she did one of these teenager nods of understanding. She got it in that moment. She got the experience that she had just had. It was a gift to all of us. Thank you. Thank you. There was a psychoanalyst who was a follower and a partner for a long time of Ayn Rand. His name was Nathaniel Branden, and he eventually moved to California, and his therapy work focused on self-esteem. So this was, 70, 80 years ago when Ayn Rand was around. And so he is very early in the self-esteem movement, and he wrote some incredible books. His name is Nathaniel Branden, and he said this: the first step toward change is awareness. The second step is acceptance. The first step towards change is awareness. The second step is acceptance. If we want the world to change for the better, to be more kind, more loving, more accepting of ourselves and those who come after us, then first, awareness. Awareness not only of what is happening around us, but awareness of our impact on what is happening. This is the first step. First awareness, then acceptance. Both of these stories that I told you are rooted in acceptance. Acceptance roots unconditional love. Through thinking through these two stories about the men in my life, it became clear to me that authentic acceptance creates an avenue for the expression of love. I told Michael that I was going to challenge the men in the room, but we all need this challenge, right? Are you willing to be that container of acceptance for others? Let's try that again. Hey, you at home, let me hear you. Are you willing to be that container of acceptance for others? Yes. Do you see how being that container changes the world around you? Yes. All right. I am the place where love shows up. It's my favorite affirmation right now. I am the place where love shows up. Because you see, it's not about gender, is it? We know that, but there is a healing going on in the world today. There are men and women and people all over the world who are demonstrating love in the streets and in the Ruby's Diner, in our homes and in our grocery stores. And this movement of love is unstoppable because it is powered by the divine. It's powered by divine love, that sacred love that is moving us. And I know for a fact that some of you are sitting here right now thinking, okay, Shelley, in 1 minute you're talking about walking in the protest march. And in the next minute you're talking about acceptance. Which is it? Which is it? I'm glad you asked. Accepting you as a person, accepting your right to exist and thrive, accepting that you too are a divine creation born of grace and living love on this planet. Accepting you is a very different thing from accepting systems of injustice that marginalize you. Do you see? The very acceptance of your humanity and your divinity is what makes me march for your rights. I accept you. I do not accept any system that oppresses you. And number two, the second answer to that question, I am aware, because awareness, right? Awareness, then acceptance, then change. I am aware of things that I want to change, and I accept that this is how it is right now, because we have to be able to look and see how it is before we can move into the truth behind the appearance. So because of the awareness and acceptance, I can work for a world that works for everyone, because this is how change happens, rooted in love and the acceptance of one another that creates space for that love to move in the world. That is why we march. This is why we march. So, our work this week is simply this, simple. Notice the places where you might be in resistance or judgment or discomfort, and ask yourself, what needs acceptance here? Use that simple question to create a space for love to move through you, through your life, into the world. This week, y'all, let's demonstrate love on a grand scale.